There are moments in life when everything suddenly feels unclear. Not because you stopped trying, not because you stopped believing, but because something deep inside your life quietly shifted. Maybe there was a time when your path felt obvious. You had plans. You had direction. You had dreams that made sense to you. You could imagine where your life was going. And for a while, things seemed to move forward the way you expected. But then something changed. The job that once felt right suddenly began to feel empty. The goals you once chased with excitement started losing their meaning. Certain relationships began fading away for reasons you could not fully explain. And slowly, a strange feeling started growing inside you. Confusion. You begin asking questions you never expected to ask. Why do I feel so lost? Why does nothing seem clear anymore? Why does it feel like my life has no direction right now? You might still wake up every morning and continue moving forward. You still go to work. You still take care of your responsibilities. You still try to do what feels right. But deep inside, something feels different. It feels like you are walking through a fog. You can see a few steps ahead, but the larger picture has disappeared. And perhaps the most difficult part of this experience is the silence. You pray. You ask for clarity. You ask for guidance. You ask God to show you what you are supposed to do next. But instead of immediate answers, there is only quiet. Days pass. Weeks pass. Sometimes even years pass. And you begin to wonder if something has gone wrong. Maybe you made the wrong decisions. Maybe you misunderstood your purpose. Maybe the dreams you once believed in were never meant to happen. This feeling of being lost can be incredibly heavy, because human beings naturally want direction. We want to know where we are going. We want reassurance that our efforts are leading somewhere meaningful. Without that clarity, life can begin to feel uncertain and even frightening. But here is a question that very few people consider. What if feeling lost is not actually a mistake? What if the confusion you are experiencing right now is not a sign that you are failing, but a sign that something deeper is happening beneath the surface? Because throughout history, many people who eventually stepped into incredible purpose first walked through a season where their life made very little sense. Their plans collapsed. Their direction disappeared. Their future looked uncertain. At the time, those seasons felt confusing, sometimes even painful. But when they looked back later, they realized something remarkable. The moment they believed they were lost was actually the moment their real journey had begun. Think about the stories of people who eventually discovered something meaningful about their lives. Very few of them describe a straight, predictable path. Most describe seasons where everything felt uncertain, moments where their previous identity no longer fit, times when they had to let go of the version of life they once imagined. Those seasons can feel deeply uncomfortable, because losing clarity often feels like losing control. And human beings naturally resist losing control. We want certainty. We want a clear roadmap. We want to understand exactly what is happening and why. But purpose rarely unfolds that way. Purpose often appears after a period of transformation. And transformation rarely begins in comfort. It often begins when the life you thought you understood starts changing in ways you never expected. What if that is exactly what is happening right now? What if the reason everything feels unclear is because the path you once followed is no longer the path you were meant to stay on? What if God sometimes allows people to feel lost, not because he has abandoned them, but because he is quietly guiding them somewhere they could not have discovered otherwise? Because sometimes the only way to move someone toward their true purpose is to first remove the illusion that they already know where they are going. When that illusion disappears, something powerful begins to happen. You start questioning your assumptions. You begin looking deeper into who you are. You become more open to change, more willing to grow, more willing to listen. And in that space of uncertainty, something new begins forming. A new perspective, a new direction, a new understanding of what your life might actually be about. But before that clarity appears, there is almost always a season where everything feels uncertain. A season where life stops making sense. A season where you feel lost. The question is not whether this season exists. The question is what it means. And more importantly, what God might be doing during this quiet and confusing moment of your life. Because what feels like confusion today may actually be the first step toward discovering the purpose that was waiting for you all along. There is a moment that many people experience at least once in their lives. A moment when everything that once felt clear suddenly becomes confusing. Not gradually, but almost overnight. For a long time, your life may have followed a path that seemed reasonable. You had goals. You had plans. You believed you understood where you were going. You imagined the future in a certain way. Maybe you thought your career would develop in a specific direction. Maybe you believed certain relationships would last forever. Maybe you were confident that the dreams you were chasing would eventually lead to the life you had always imagined. And for a while, it seemed possible. You worked hard. You stayed committed. You believed that if you kept moving forward, things would eventually fall into place. But then something unexpected happened. A door closed. A plan failed. A relationship changed. Or perhaps nothing dramatic happened at all. Sometimes the shift is quiet. So quiet that at first you cannot even explain what feels different. You simply begin noticing that something inside you has changed. The goals that once motivated you no longer excite you. The path you once believed in now feels strangely empty. You continue moving forward because you do not know what else to do. But deep inside, a question begins to grow. Is this really the life I am supposed to be living? That question can be unsettling, because it introduces uncertainty into a place where certainty once existed. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. Human beings naturally prefer stability. We want our decisions to feel correct. We want reassurance that our efforts are meaningful. When those feelings disappear, we often interpret the experience as failure. We assume something must be wrong. We think perhaps we made a mistake. Perhaps we misunderstood what we were supposed to do. Perhaps we wasted time pursuing the wrong direction. But what if that interpretation is incomplete? What if the moment life stops making sense is not the end of your direction, but the beginning of a deeper one? Because many people assume that purpose always begins with clarity. They imagine that when someone finds their purpose, everything suddenly becomes obvious. They think purpose arrives like a clear map with every step already visible. But in reality, purpose often begins with confusion. It begins when the path you once trusted starts falling apart. At first, this feels terrifying, because losing clarity feels like losing control. And control is something we naturally hold on to very tightly. When we believe we understand our path, we feel safe. We feel confident. We feel capable of planning our future. But when that understanding disappears, we are forced into a space we rarely choose voluntarily. The space of uncertainty. And in that space, many people experience something they did not expect. They begin asking deeper questions. Questions they never asked when everything seemed certain. Questions like, who am I really? What actually matters to me? Why do I feel drawn towards certain things and disconnected from others? What kind of life would truly feel meaningful? These questions can feel uncomfortable at first, because they challenge the assumptions we have built our lives around. But they also open the door to something powerful. Self-discovery. Sometimes the life we planned for ourselves was built on expectations we never questioned. Expectations from family. Expectations from society. Expectations based on what we believed success was supposed to look like. For years, we may have followed those expectations without realizing they did not fully align with who we truly are. But when life stops making sense, those expectations begin to break apart. The plans that once seemed obvious no longer feel right. And in that moment, we face a choice. We can try to force our old plans to continue, or we can pause and begin exploring something deeper. This pause is often where God begins doing some of his most important work. Because as long as we are completely convinced that our plans are perfect, we rarely invite God to reshape them. We assume we already know the way. But when clarity disappears, something changes inside us. We become more open, more humble, more willing to listen. We start paying attention to things we once ignored. Moments of quiet reflection become more meaningful. Conversations with wise people suddenly carry more weight. We begin noticing small shifts in our interests, values, and desires. And slowly, something remarkable begins to happen. The confusion that once felt like chaos begins to create space. Space for growth. Space for new ideas. Space for a new direction that may have been impossible to see before. This is why many people later look back at the most confusing seasons of their lives with unexpected gratitude. At the time, those seasons felt like failure. They felt like everything was falling apart. But in reality, something else was happening. The old path was being removed. Not to punish them, but to make room for a new one. Think about how often people remain in situations that no longer align with who they are becoming. Jobs that drain their spirit. Goals that no longer inspire them. Relationships that keep them from growing. Why do people remain in these situations? Because leaving them feels uncertain. And uncertainty is frightening. But sometimes the only way to lead someone toward the life they are meant to live is to make the old life feel impossible to continue. God may not always force change dramatically. Sometimes he simply removes the sense of peace that once existed. The path that once felt comfortable begins to feel restless. The excitement that once motivated you slowly fades. And eventually, you reach a moment where continuing forward no longer feels right. That moment can feel confusing, even painful, but it may also be the first sign that something new is beginning. Because purpose rarely appears while we are completely comfortable with our current direction. Purpose often appears when we are willing to question the path we once believed was permanent. And that willingness usually begins when life stops making sense. So if you are in a season where everything feels unclear, if the plans you once trusted now feel uncertain, if you feel like you are walking through a fog without knowing exactly where you are going, it may not mean you are lost. It may mean you are standing at the beginning of a transition. A moment where the life you once imagined is slowly giving way to the life you were truly meant to discover. And although that process can feel confusing, it may also be one of the most important turning points your journey will ever experience. One of the most confusing parts of feeling lost is that it often comes with another strange experience. You begin feeling like the person you used to be no longer fits you. Things that once defined your identity suddenly feel distant. The goals you once proudly talked about start sounding hollow when you say them out loud. The roles you once played so naturally begin to feel uncomfortable, almost like wearing clothes that no longer fit your body. At first, this can be deeply unsettling, because identity is something most people build carefully over many years. You grow up learning who you are supposed to be: a successful person, a reliable friend, a loyal partner, a hardworking professional, someone who follows a certain path. Over time, these roles become part of how you see yourself. They give structure to your life. They help you feel grounded. They allow you to explain your place in the world. But what happens when those identities start shifting? What happens when the person you thought you were begins to feel incomplete? This is often one of the hidden reasons why people feel lost before discovering their deeper purpose. Because before something new can emerge in your life, something old usually has to break. And identity is often the first thing that begins to change. Many people resist this process without realizing it. They sense that something inside them wants to grow in a different direction. But the identity they built in the past feels too important to let go. They worry about disappointing others. They worry about losing stability. They worry about stepping into something unknown. So they try to hold on to the version of themselves they already understand. But over time, the tension grows. The gap between who they are becoming and who they used to be becomes impossible to ignore. And eventually, the old identity begins to crack. Sometimes this happens through unexpected life events. A career change, a failure that forces you to rethink your direction, a relationship that ends, a season of isolation where you are left alone with your thoughts. These moments can feel painful because they dismantle the identity you spent years constructing. But they also create something incredibly valuable. Freedom. Freedom to ask questions you were once afraid to ask. Freedom to explore possibilities you never allowed yourself to consider. Freedom to redefine what success, purpose, and meaning truly look like for you. When your old identity begins to break, it may feel like your life is falling apart, but sometimes it is actually falling into place. Because the identity you once held may have been based on incomplete understanding. Maybe you believed your value came from achievement. Maybe you believed your worth depended on pleasing others. Maybe you believed your future had to follow a specific script in order to be meaningful. Those beliefs can shape your life for many years, but they may not represent the full truth of who you are meant to become. When God begins guiding someone toward a deeper purpose, he often starts by gently dismantling the identity that no longer fits. Not to destroy the person you are, but to reveal the person you are capable of becoming. This process rarely feels comfortable, because identity provides stability. Even if that identity is limiting, it still feels familiar. And human beings naturally cling to what feels familiar. But growth requires movement. It requires the courage to step beyond the version of yourself you have always known. Many people who eventually discover profound purpose describe this exact stage. A moment when they no longer recognize the person they used to be. The career path that once defined them no longer felt right. The ambitions they once chased began losing their power. Even their relationships started changing as their values shifted. At the time, they interpreted these experiences as signs of confusion. But in hindsight, they realized something important. Their old identity was simply too small for the life they were being prepared to live. Think about how many people spend their lives trapped inside identities they built when they were younger. An identity formed by expectations. An identity formed by fear. An identity formed by what seemed safe at the time. Those identities can limit a person's potential without them even realizing it. They create invisible boundaries around what someone believes they are capable of doing. But when those boundaries begin breaking apart, something remarkable happens. New possibilities appear. You begin imagining a life that once seemed impossible. You start considering paths that previously felt unrealistic. You discover parts of yourself that were hidden beneath years of routine and expectation. This discovery can feel both exciting and terrifying, because stepping into a new identity requires letting go of the certainty the old one provided. And certainty is comforting, but purpose rarely grows inside comfort. Purpose grows when someone is willing to step into uncertainty with trust. Trust that the confusion they feel is not meaningless. Trust that the changes happening inside them are not random. Trust that something deeper is unfolding even if they cannot see the full picture yet. When you feel like the person you used to be is slowly disappearing, it may not mean you are losing yourself. It may mean you are finally meeting your true self. The version of you that is not defined by expectations. The version of you that is not limited by old beliefs. The version of you that is capable of living with greater purpose and authenticity. But reaching that version requires a transition. A moment where the old identity fades before the new one fully appears. That space between identities is often where people feel the most lost, because the past no longer fits, and the future has not yet revealed itself. It feels like standing between two worlds, one that is disappearing, and one that has not yet arrived. This is the space where many people become discouraged. They believe they have lost their direction. They assume they are failing. But in reality, they may simply be in the middle of transformation. And transformation is rarely clear while it is happening. Only later do people recognize how necessary those changes were. Only later do they understand why their old identity had to break. Because the person they eventually became could never have existed within the boundaries of the person they used to be. So if you feel like the version of yourself that once felt familiar is slowly fading, if your old ambitions, goals, and identities no longer feel complete, it may not be a sign that you are losing your way. It may be the sign that you are preparing to discover who you were truly meant to become. And although that process can feel uncertain, it may also be the beginning of a purpose far greater than anything you once imagined. One of the hardest things about feeling lost is that, on the surface, it seems like nothing meaningful is happening. You wake up each day without the same excitement you once had. The direction that used to guide your decisions now feels unclear. You move forward, but it often feels like you are wandering rather than progressing. And because of that, many people begin believing something dangerous. They believe their life has paused. They believe they are falling behind. They believe everyone else seems to be moving forward while they are stuck in place. But what if that perception is incomplete? What if the season that feels the most unproductive is actually one of the most important seasons of growth you will ever experience? Because not all growth in life is visible. Some of the most important transformation happens beneath the surface, where no one else can see it. Think about how a tree grows. When people look at a tree, they usually notice the branches, the leaves, the visible height. But before any of those things appear, something else has to happen first. The roots must grow. And root growth is invisible. It happens underground, quietly, slowly, sometimes for long periods of time. During that time, nothing above the surface seems to change. But beneath the soil, the tree is preparing for something greater. It is building the foundation it will need to grow taller, stronger, and more stable in the future. If the roots grow deep enough, the tree will eventually withstand storms that would destroy weaker plants. But if the roots are shallow, the first strong wind may tear it out of the ground. Human growth often works the same way. When God prepares someone for a meaningful purpose, He rarely focuses only on their visible success. Instead, He often focuses on their inner foundation, their character, their humility, their patience, their ability to trust even when they cannot see the full path ahead. These qualities cannot be built instantly. They are developed through experiences, through challenges, through seasons that require reflection rather than constant activity. When you feel lost, something inside you is often changing. You begin seeing life differently. You begin questioning things you once accepted without thought. You begin noticing patterns in your behavior, your choices, and your priorities. These realizations may feel uncomfortable, but they are powerful. Because awareness is the first step toward transformation. Many people move through life without ever slowing down long enough to examine themselves deeply. They remain busy chasing goals, busy following routines, busy maintaining the image they have created for the world. But in the quiet seasons of feeling lost, those distractions often fade. And when they do, something remarkable happens. You begin meeting yourself honestly. You notice the fears that once guided your decisions. You recognize the habits that have limited your growth. You become aware of beliefs you accepted years ago that may no longer be true. This self-awareness can feel overwhelming at first, but it also creates the opportunity for real change. Because once you see something clearly, you can begin transforming it. During this season, many people also begin developing something else that will shape their future purpose. Empathy. When life feels uncertain, you begin understanding the struggles of others in a new way. You realize that many people around you are also facing battles you cannot see. You recognize how fragile plans can be, how unpredictable life can become, and how deeply human it is to search for meaning in difficult moments. This awareness softens your heart. It makes you more compassionate, more patient, more understanding of the pain others carry. And those qualities are often essential for the purpose you will eventually step into. Because purpose is rarely about personal achievement alone. True purpose often involves helping others, guiding them, encouraging them, supporting them through struggles you may have experienced yourself. But you cannot guide someone through darkness if you have never walked through it. You cannot comfort someone who feels lost if you have never experienced that feeling. So sometimes the season where you feel the most uncertain is the season that is quietly shaping the wisdom you will one day share with others. Another important transformation that happens during this time is the strengthening of your faith. When everything in life seems predictable, faith can remain shallow. It is easy to trust when the path ahead feels clear. But when clarity disappears, faith becomes something deeper. It becomes a choice, a decision to trust even when the outcome is uncertain, a willingness to keep moving forward even when the destination is not fully visible. This type of faith is not built in moments of comfort. It is built in moments of uncertainty, in quiet prayers when you are searching for guidance, in moments of reflection when you question what the future holds, in the decision to keep believing that your life still holds meaning even when you cannot yet see how. Over time, this kind of faith becomes incredibly strong because it is not based on perfect circumstances. It is based on trust. Trust that the struggles you are facing are not meaningless. Trust that the confusion you feel is part of a larger process. Trust that the story of your life is still unfolding. During this season, your priorities may also begin changing. Things that once felt urgent may begin losing their importance. You start focusing less on external validation and more on internal alignment. Instead of asking, what will impress others? You begin asking, what truly matters? Instead of chasing recognition, you begin seeking purpose. Instead of trying to control every outcome, you begin learning to surrender certain things you cannot control. This shift in perspective can feel subtle at first, but over time, it reshapes the direction of your life. Because when your values change, your decisions change. And when your decisions change, your path eventually changes as well. Many people do not realize how much internal transformation occurs during seasons of feeling lost until they look back years later. At the time, it may feel like you are simply surviving, trying to figure things out, trying to regain clarity. But beneath the surface, something far more significant is happening. Your character is strengthening. Your understanding of life is deepening. Your priorities are realigning. Your faith is growing stronger. Your compassion for others is expanding. And slowly, the foundation for your future purpose is being built. The world often celebrates visible success, achievements, titles, recognition. But the qualities that sustain meaningful success are often developed quietly, in moments when no one is watching, in seasons when progress feels invisible, in periods where growth happens internally rather than externally. So if you are currently in a season where you feel lost, where the path ahead seems unclear, where you wonder if you are moving forward at all, it may be helpful to consider a different perspective. Maybe your life has not paused. Maybe the most important growth of your journey is happening right now, even if you cannot see the results yet, even if the future still feels uncertain. Because just like the roots of a tree growing quietly beneath the soil, the transformation happening inside you today may be preparing you for a purpose far greater than you can currently imagine. And when that purpose finally begins to reveal itself, you may realize that this season of feeling lost was never a detour. It was preparation. Another painful experience that often appears during seasons of feeling lost is something many people struggle to understand. Relationships begin to change. People who once felt very close may slowly drift away. Conversations that once felt natural start becoming uncomfortable. Connections that once seemed strong begin fading without a clear explanation. Sometimes this happens quietly. Other times it happens suddenly. A friendship ends. A relationship collapses. A group you once belonged to no longer feels like the right place for you. When these things happen, the first reaction is usually confusion. You begin asking difficult questions. Did I do something wrong? Why is this happening now? Why do people I care about seem to be disappearing from my life? The truth is that not every relationship in your life is meant to last forever. Some people enter your life for a specific season. Some enter for a lesson. And some enter to help shape you into the person you are becoming. But as your life begins shifting toward a deeper purpose, certain relationships may no longer align with that direction. This does not necessarily mean those people are bad. It simply means your paths may be changing. Growth has a way of revealing differences that were once hidden. When your priorities begin evolving, the connections that once felt natural may start feeling different. For example, if your perspective on life begins shifting toward deeper meaning and purpose, you may notice that some conversations you once enjoyed now feel empty. You may become less interested in superficial distractions. You may start valuing honesty, growth, and depth in ways you did not before. When that happens, some relationships naturally become stronger, but others begin fading. This transition can feel lonely, because human beings are deeply wired for connection. Losing relationships, even when it is necessary, can create a sense of grief. You remember the memories you shared, the laughter, the time spent together, and part of you wonders if things could have stayed the same. But sometimes they cannot, because growth changes people. And when you change, the dynamics of your relationships inevitably change as well. During seasons where God is preparing someone for a new direction in life, one of the quiet shifts that often happens is a realignment of relationships. People who once influenced your decisions may no longer have the same influence. Voices that once shaped your perspective may begin fading into the background. And while this process can feel painful, it often creates space for something important. Clarity. When certain voices become quieter, you begin hearing your own inner guidance more clearly. You begin noticing the direction your heart is pulling you toward. You begin recognizing what truly matters to you, rather than simply following the expectations of others. Many people spend years shaping their lives around the opinions of the people closest to them. They make decisions based on what others expect. They follow paths that feel safe within their social circles. They maintain identities that keep relationships comfortable. But purpose often requires stepping beyond those expectations. And that step can create distance. Because not everyone will understand the changes happening in your life. Some people may feel confused by your growth. Some may feel threatened by it. Others may simply not recognize the person you are becoming. That does not make them wrong. It simply means they are walking a different path. And sometimes, two paths that once ran side by side eventually begin moving in different directions. When this happens, it is easy to interpret it as rejection. You may feel like people are abandoning you. But sometimes, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. God may be clearing space in your life so new connections can appear. Connections that align with the person you are becoming. Connections that support the purpose you are moving toward. Connections that challenge you to grow rather than keep you comfortable. Think about how many people enter new seasons of life and suddenly meet individuals who influence their future in powerful ways. A mentor, a partner, a friend who encourages a new perspective, a community that supports deeper growth. These relationships often appear after other connections have faded, not because the past relationships were meaningless, but because each season of life brings new influences. However, before those new connections can fully enter your life, there must first be space for them. And sometimes that space is created through painful goodbyes. This does not mean you must hold resentment toward people who are no longer close to you. In fact, one of the healthiest perspectives during this transition is gratitude. Gratitude for the role those people played in your journey. Gratitude for the lessons you learned together. Gratitude for the memories you shared. Even if the relationship has ended, the impact it had on your life still matters. Every person you meet contributes something to your story. Some teach you love. Some teach you patience. Some teach you boundaries. Some teach you what kind of life you truly want to build. All of those lessons help shape the person you are becoming. And sometimes the people who leave your life were simply meant to guide you to a certain point in your journey. Once that lesson is complete, the relationship naturally changes. One of the most difficult parts of this process is accepting that not everyone will walk with you into your future. Even people you once imagined would always be there. Even people who once felt essential to your life. But the reality of personal growth is that it often involves transitions. And those transitions can reshape your social world. The loneliness that sometimes appears during this time is not necessarily a permanent state. It is often a temporary space between seasons. A quiet moment where old connections have faded, but new ones have not yet fully formed. This space can feel uncomfortable, but it also allows you to strengthen your relationship with yourself. You learn how to stand independently. You learn how to trust your own judgment. You learn how to find peace even when external support is limited. These lessons create emotional resilience. They prepare you for the responsibilities and opportunities that may come later in your life. Because purpose often requires strength. The strength to stand firm when others doubt you. The strength to pursue something meaningful even when it feels unfamiliar. The strength to remain committed to your values even when doing so is not popular. That kind of strength is rarely developed in environments where everything remains comfortable and predictable. It is developed through seasons of change. Seasons where relationships shift. Seasons where you are forced to reevaluate who truly supports your growth. Seasons where you discover which connections are rooted in authenticity and which were simply rooted in convenience. Over time, the loneliness that once felt heavy often transforms into something else. Clarity. You begin recognizing which relationships truly align with your future. You become more intentional about the people you allow close to your life. You prioritize connections that encourage honesty, growth, and purpose. And slowly, new relationships begin forming. People who understand the direction you are moving toward. People who share similar values. People who support your vision rather than resisting it. These connections often feel different, deeper, more meaningful, more aligned with the person you have become. And when you look back on the relationships that once faded, you may begin seeing them through a different lens. Instead of viewing them as losses, you may begin recognizing them as transitions. Necessary steps that help guide you toward the life you are now building. So if you are currently experiencing distance in certain relationships, if people who once felt close now seem far away, if you find yourself standing in a quieter, more isolated season of life, it may not mean something is wrong. It may simply mean your life is realigning. The path ahead may require a different environment, different influences, different voices speaking into your journey. And sometimes, before those new influences appear, the old ones must gently step aside. Not as punishment, not as abandonment, but as part of the quiet preparation for the purpose that is slowly unfolding in your life. One of the most difficult experiences people face during seasons of uncertainty is waiting. Not the simple kind of waiting that lasts a few minutes or a few days, but the kind of waiting that stretches across months, sometimes years. The kind where you feel ready for the next chapter of your life, but nothing seems to move. Opportunities don't appear the way you expected. Doors remain closed. The clarity you keep praying for doesn't arrive when you want it to. And slowly, a quiet frustration begins to grow inside you. You start wondering why progress feels so slow. You question whether you misunderstood the direction your life was supposed to take. You look at other people, and it seems like everything is happening quickly for them. They find their path. They build their careers. They step into their purpose. Meanwhile, you feel like you are standing still. But what if the waiting itself is not meaningless? What if the delay is not punishment, but preparation? Because one of the most overlooked truths about purpose is this: timing matters just as much as direction. You may be capable of stepping into something meaningful, but if it happens before you are fully prepared, it can collapse under pressure. Many people focus only on the destination. They imagine the moment their purpose finally appears, the moment everything becomes clear, the moment they step into the life they have been hoping for. But very few people consider the preparation required to sustain that moment. Because purpose is not just about opportunity. It is about responsibility. And responsibility requires readiness. Think about how many people suddenly receive success before they are emotionally prepared for it. They achieve recognition, influence, opportunity. But without the inner foundation to handle those things, success becomes overwhelming. Pressure builds, expectations increase, and eventually, what once seemed like a dream becomes something difficult to carry. This is why seasons of waiting often exist. They give you time to grow into the person who can handle the future you are moving toward. During this waiting period, many invisible transformations are happening. Your patience is being strengthened. Your ability to endure uncertainty is expanding. Your character is becoming more resilient. These qualities are not glamorous. They are not celebrated publicly, but they are essential, because when your purpose finally arrives, those qualities will determine whether you remain grounded or become overwhelmed. Waiting also changes how you value opportunities. When something arrives quickly, people often take it for granted. But when you have waited a long time for something meaningful, you treat it differently. You appreciate it more deeply. You protect it more carefully. You commit to it with greater dedication. The waiting builds gratitude, and gratitude creates humility. Another reason waiting seasons exist is that clarity often grows slowly. At the beginning of a journey, you may believe you know exactly what your purpose looks like. But as time passes, your understanding deepens. You begin seeing things differently. You recognize possibilities you never considered before. Sometimes the dream you once had evolves into something far greater than what you originally imagined. But that evolution requires time. It requires reflection. It requires life experiences that reshape your perspective. Without those experiences, you might step into a path that is too narrow for the impact you are capable of having. Waiting expands your vision. It allows your understanding of purpose to mature. It shifts your focus from immediate results to long-term meaning. This transformation does not always feel encouraging while it is happening. In fact, waiting can feel incredibly discouraging. You may question your direction. You may wonder if you made mistakes. You may feel tempted to abandon your dreams entirely and settle for something easier. Many people give up during this stage, not because they lack talent or potential, but because they lose patience. They assume that if something meaningful has not happened yet, it never will. But history is filled with people whose greatest contributions appeared after long seasons of waiting. Their early years were filled with uncertainty. They faced setbacks. They experienced rejection. They spent years learning lessons that seemed unrelated to their future purpose. But later, those experiences became the foundation for everything they would accomplish. The waiting season was not wasted time. It was hidden preparation. There is also something else that waiting teaches: trust. When things move according to your schedule, trust is easy. But when the timeline stretches longer than you expected, trust becomes a conscious decision. You must choose to believe that your life is still moving forward even when you cannot see immediate progress. You must choose to believe that the delays have meaning even when the reasons remain unclear. This kind of trust strengthens your faith in ways comfort never could. It teaches you how to move forward without needing complete certainty. It teaches you how to remain steady when life becomes unpredictable. It teaches you how to focus on growth rather than constant validation. Over time, something interesting begins to happen. The waiting no longer feels as frustrating as it once did, because you begin recognizing the changes happening within you. You notice how much stronger you have become, how much wiser your perspective has grown, how much clearer your priorities have become. You realize that the person you are today is far more prepared than the person you were when the waiting first began. And that realization brings a new kind of peace. You begin understanding that purpose is not something that suddenly appears out of nowhere. It is something that grows gradually, something that unfolds step by step, something that becomes clearer as you become more ready to carry it. When the moment finally arrives for the next chapter of your life, it often feels different than you imagined. It does not feel rushed. It does not feel forced. Instead, it feels aligned. The opportunities that appear make sense with everything you have experienced. The lessons you learned during the waiting season suddenly become useful. The patience you developed helps you remain calm under pressure. The wisdom you gained helps you navigate challenges with confidence. And you realize something important. If everything had happened earlier, you might not have been ready. You might not have understood the responsibility. You might not have had the strength required to sustain it. The waiting was never about delaying your future. It was about preparing you to handle it. So if you find yourself in a season where progress feels slow, where clarity seems distant, where you feel like life is asking you to be patient longer than you expected, consider the possibility that something important is still unfolding. Even if you cannot see it yet, the waiting may be shaping the very qualities that will allow you to step into your purpose with strength, humility, and wisdom. And when that moment finally arrives, you may realize that the time you once viewed as delay was actually one of the most important parts of your journey. There is a moment in many people's lives that feels deeply confusing. It happens after a long season of growth, after periods of waiting, after moments where you feel like you have learned important lessons about yourself and about life. You begin to feel like something meaningful may finally be close. Like the purpose you have been searching for might be just ahead. And yet, instead of things suddenly becoming easier, life sometimes becomes harder. Unexpected problems appear. Plans begin falling apart. The clarity you thought was coming suddenly feels distant again. This moment can feel incredibly discouraging, because after everything you have already endured, you expected relief. You expected confirmation. You expected that things would finally start moving forward. But instead, you find yourself facing another challenge, another obstacle, another situation that tests your patience and your faith. During these moments, many people begin questioning everything. They ask themselves whether they misunderstood their path. They wonder if all the growth they experienced really meant anything. They feel tempted to give up entirely. But what many people do not realize is that this stage of the journey is extremely common. In fact, some of the most important moments of transformation happen right before a new chapter begins. Because purpose does not only require preparation, it also requires commitment. And commitment is often revealed through testing. When life is easy, it is simple to believe in your direction. But when challenges appear, the strength of your conviction is revealed. You begin discovering whether your faith is based on comfort or something deeper. Think about how many people begin pursuing meaningful goals with enthusiasm. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. They are motivated. They are confident. They imagine the future they want to create. But when difficulties appear, many people abandon their path. Not because the goal is impossible, but because the challenges feel overwhelming. This is why moments of testing exist. They reveal the difference between temporary interest and genuine commitment. They show whether someone is willing to continue moving forward even when the journey becomes difficult. For those who are being prepared for a deeper purpose, these moments can feel intense. You may feel like everything you believed is being questioned. You may feel like the stability you built during previous seasons is suddenly shaking again. But sometimes these moments are not meant to destroy your faith. They are meant to strengthen it. Because faith that has never been challenged remains fragile. But faith that has endured hardship becomes unshakable. When you pass through seasons where circumstances seem uncertain, yet you continue trusting that your life still has meaning, something powerful happens inside you. Your belief becomes rooted in something stronger than immediate results. It becomes rooted in conviction. And conviction is what allows people to remain steady when their purpose begins placing greater responsibility on their shoulders. Another reason this testing often happens before purpose appears is because it reveals hidden fears. When you are close to stepping into something significant, the pressure naturally increases. The possibility of failure feels more real. The responsibility feels heavier. And sometimes those pressures expose doubts you did not even realize you had. You may begin asking questions like, am I truly capable of this? What if I fail? What if I disappoint the people who believe in me? What if I am not strong enough for the future that is coming? These questions can feel frightening, but they also create an opportunity. Because once those fears become visible, they can be confronted. You begin examining them honestly. You begin challenging the beliefs that have limited your confidence. You begin realizing that courage is not the absence of fear, It is the decision to move forward despite it. This process transforms how you approach the future. Instead of relying only on confidence, you develop resilience. Resilience allows you to continue moving forward even when confidence temporarily fades. It allows you to adapt when unexpected obstacles appear. It allows you to stay committed to your purpose even when the journey becomes difficult. And these qualities become incredibly valuable once your purpose begins impacting other people. Because meaningful purpose rarely exists without challenges. Helping others requires patience. Leading others requires strength. Creating something meaningful requires perseverance. Without resilience, the weight of those responsibilities can become overwhelming. So sometimes the testing you experience right before a new chapter begins is actually preparing you to carry the future that is coming. There is another important transformation that happens during these moments. You begin shifting your focus away from control. Many people spend years trying to control every aspect of their lives. They want to know exactly what will happen next. They want guarantees that their efforts will succeed. They want certainty before they take risks. But purpose often requires stepping into situations where certainty does not exist. You may have a clear sense of direction, but the details are still unfolding. You may feel called towards something meaningful, but the path is still developing step by step. During the testing phase, you begin learning how to release the need for complete control. You learn how to move forward with faith rather than perfect certainty. You learn how to trust that even when circumstances feel unpredictable, your life is still moving towards something meaningful. This shift in mindset is powerful because once you release the need to control everything, you become more open to possibilities you never expected. You begin recognizing opportunities that previously felt too uncertain to pursue. You become more adaptable, more creative, more willing to take steps that lead toward growth. Many people later look back on the hardest tests of their lives and realize something surprising. Those moments did not stop them. They strengthened them. They revealed strengths they never knew they possessed. They forced them to develop courage, patience, faith, perseverance. And when the new chapter of their life finally began, they were far more prepared than they would have been without those challenges. So if you currently feel like your faith is being tested, if the path ahead seems uncertain, if you feel like you are facing one final wave of challenges after a long season of waiting, it may not be a sign that you are moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes it is a sign that you are closer than you realize, closer to the clarity you have been seeking, closer to the purpose that has been slowly forming throughout your journey. Because right before the next chapter of life begins, there is often one final moment where you must decide something important. Whether you will trust the process, even when the outcome is still unfolding. Whether you will continue moving forward, even when the path remains uncertain. And in making that decision, you may discover that the strength you were searching for was already growing inside you all along. After long seasons of confusion, waiting, and testing, something subtle begins to change. It usually doesn't arrive as a dramatic moment. There is rarely a loud announcement. There is no sudden voice telling you exactly what to do next. Instead, the signs that your purpose is beginning to appear are often quiet. So quiet that many people miss them completely. But if you pay attention carefully, you can begin noticing small shifts happening inside you and around you. The first sign is a new kind of clarity. Not the kind of clarity where every detail of your future becomes visible, but a deeper sense of direction. You may not know exactly where the road will lead, but you start feeling more certain about which direction you should walk. Decisions that once felt confusing begin feeling simpler. You start recognizing what aligns with your values and what does not. You become less distracted by paths that once seemed appealing but no longer feel meaningful. This clarity doesn't always come from external advice. It often grows from within. Through everything you experienced during your season of feeling lost, your understanding of yourself has matured. You now know more clearly what matters to you. You understand what kind of life you want to build. And because of that, your decisions begin aligning with that vision more naturally. The second sign is a shift in your energy. During seasons of confusion, people often feel mentally exhausted. Everything requires effort. Even simple decisions can feel overwhelming. But when purpose begins forming, a new kind of motivation appears. You begin feeling drawn towards certain ideas, projects, or directions. You feel curiosity returning. You feel a quiet excitement about possibilities you once overlooked. This energy is different from temporary motivation. It feels deeper, more consistent. Even when challenges appear, the interest remains. Something inside you keeps pulling you forward. And that pull is often a signal that your purpose is beginning to take shape. Another important sign is that your past experiences begin making sense. During earlier seasons of your life, you may have faced situations that felt random or painful. Moments where you questioned why certain things happened, why certain doors closed, why certain struggles lasted longer than expected. But when purpose begins appearing, those experiences start connecting in ways you never noticed before. Skills you developed years ago suddenly become useful. Lessons from difficult relationships help you guide others more wisely. Challenges you once struggled to understand become sources of strength. It starts feeling like the different chapters of your life are forming a larger story. A story that is preparing you to do something meaningful with what you have learned. Another sign that purpose is appearing is the way opportunities begin showing up. Not necessarily huge life-changing opportunities immediately. Often they begin small. A conversation that inspires a new idea. A project that allows you to use your talents in a meaningful way. An unexpected introduction to someone who shares your vision. A chance to help someone using the wisdom you gained from your struggles. These moments may seem minor at first, but they often become stepping stones. Each small step leads to another. Each opportunity opens the door to something slightly bigger. And over time, the path becomes clearer. Many people overlook these early opportunities because they expect purpose to arrive as one massive breakthrough. But purpose rarely appears that way. It usually unfolds gradually, through a series of moments that guide you forward step by step. Another quiet sign that your purpose is emerging is the change in how you view success. Earlier in life, success may have been defined by recognition, achievements, or approval from others. But as purpose becomes clearer, your definition begins shifting. You become more interested in impact, more focused on creating something meaningful rather than simply gaining attention. You begin asking questions like, who can I help with what I've learned? How can my experiences serve a greater purpose? What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? This shift in perspective is powerful, because when your focus moves from personal success to meaningful contribution, your work begins carrying deeper purpose. Another sign many people notice is an increased sense of peace. This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. Challenges will still appear. Uncertainty will still exist. But internally, something feels steadier. You begin trusting your journey more. The anxiety that once came from not knowing your direction starts fading. Instead, you feel a quiet confidence that your life is moving towards something meaningful. You stop rushing. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You begin focusing on the path that feels authentic to you. And that inner peace becomes a powerful guide, because it allows you to make decisions without being controlled by fear. Another interesting shift that often appears during this stage is the way people respond to you. As your sense of purpose becomes clearer, others may begin noticing something different about you. Your perspective may inspire them. Your experiences may help them understand their own struggles. Your words may encourage them during difficult moments. You may find yourself guiding others naturally, offering insight, sharing lessons you learned during your own seasons of confusion. And without even realizing it, you begin stepping into a role of influence. Not necessarily through titles or positions, but through impact. Your story begins helping others navigate their own journeys. And that is often one of the clearest signs that purpose is forming. Because purpose is rarely isolated. It usually involves contributing something meaningful to the lives of others. Finally, one of the most important signs that your purpose is beginning to appear is the courage you develop to move forward. Earlier in your journey, fear may have held you back. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of making the wrong decision. But after everything you have experienced, those fears no longer control you the same way. You realize that uncertainty is part of growth. You understand that mistakes are opportunities to learn. You accept that the future cannot be perfectly predicted. And instead of waiting for complete certainty, you begin taking steps forward anyway. That courage is powerful, because purpose is not something you simply discover. It is something you actively step into, through decisions, through actions, through the willingness to pursue meaning even when the path continues unfolding. And when you combine clarity, energy, opportunity, peace, and courage, something remarkable begins happening. Your life starts aligning with the purpose that was quietly forming during all those earlier seasons of confusion and waiting. What once felt like chaos begins revealing a pattern. What once felt like delay begins revealing preparation. And you begin realizing that the time you spent feeling lost was never wasted. It was shaping the person you needed to become, preparing you for the responsibility of the purpose now beginning to appear. There is a moment that often comes much later. A moment when you pause and look back at the journey you have walked. And suddenly, something surprising happens. The season that once felt like confusion begins to make sense. The years where you felt lost. The moments when nothing seemed clear. The long waiting periods that once felt frustrating. They begin connecting together like pieces of a puzzle. At the time, it felt like your life had no direction. But looking back, you begin seeing patterns. You realize that every challenge shaped something inside you. Every disappointment taught you something important. Every delay strengthened your patience. Every season of uncertainty forced you to grow in ways comfort never could. What once looked like chaos slowly reveals itself as preparation. You start recognizing that the version of you who existed before those seasons would not have been ready for the life you are now stepping into. You might not have had the emotional strength. You might not have had the wisdom. You might not have had the humility that purpose often requires. But the journey changed you. Slowly, quietly, without you even realizing it. And that transformation is what allowed your purpose to finally begin unfolding. Many people imagine purpose as a single moment. They picture a sudden breakthrough, a dramatic realization, a clear sign that instantly changes everything. But in reality, purpose rarely appears that way. It usually arrives through growth, through experience, through lessons that shape your perspective over time. And often, the very seasons that felt the most confusing are the ones that prepared you the most. Think about how many people only discover their deepest purpose after facing difficulties. Someone who struggled with loneliness learns how to guide others through emotional pain. Someone who experienced failure learns how to teach resilience. Someone who walked through uncertainty learns how to help others find clarity. Your struggles often become the very tools that allow you to help someone else. The pain you once questioned becomes wisdom you can share. The lessons you learned during your hardest seasons become the guidance someone else desperately needs. And suddenly, the story of your life begins carrying deeper meaning, not just for you, but for the people you encounter along the way. Another realization that often comes during this stage is that purpose is not a destination. It is a journey that continues evolving. Many people believe that once they discover their purpose, everything will finally feel complete. But purpose is not something you arrive at once and remain forever. It grows with you. As you gain new experiences, your impact expands. As you learn more about the world, your vision becomes larger. As you help others, your understanding deepens. Purpose continues unfolding throughout your life. But the important moment is when you first recognize that your life has meaning beyond the struggles you once feared. You begin seeing your story differently. Instead of viewing difficult seasons as wasted time, you begin seeing them as chapters that shaped your strength. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, you begin seeing them as lessons that gave you wisdom. Instead of seeing waiting as delay, you begin seeing it as preparation. This shift in perspective is powerful because it changes how you approach the future. You no longer fear uncertainty the same way. You no longer panic when life becomes unpredictable. You understand that growth often happens during moments when the path ahead is not fully visible. And that understanding allows you to move forward with greater peace. You stop chasing quick validation. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop assuming that your journey must look like someone else's. Instead, you begin trusting the unique path your life is unfolding. Another important change that happens is gratitude, even for the difficult seasons. Because you realize that without those experiences, you might never have become the person you are today. You might never have developed the empathy that allows you to understand others deeply. You might never have gained the courage that helps you face challenges with confidence. You might never have discovered the values that now guide your decisions. What once felt like loss begins revealing hidden gifts. And those gifts become part of the purpose you now carry forward. You also begin recognizing something else. The feeling of being lost was never permanent. It was simply a stage of transformation, a period where your old identity was fading, but your new direction had not yet fully appeared. That in-between space can feel uncomfortable, but it is also where some of the most important growth happens. It is where you learn who you truly are. It is where you release expectations that no longer fit your life. It is where you begin building the foundation for the future you are stepping into. And once you move beyond that season, you begin understanding something many people only realize later in life. Being lost was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of discovering your real direction. So if you are still walking through that uncertain season, if you still feel like your path has not fully appeared, remember this. Many people who eventually step into meaningful purpose once felt exactly the way you feel now. Confused, uncertain, unsure about what the future held. But those seasons were not wasted. They were preparing something deeper. Strength, wisdom, clarity, faith. All the qualities that allow someone to step into their purpose with humility and courage. And one day, when you look back at the journey you are walking now, you may realize that the season you once called lost was actually the moment your real story was beginning. At some point in every meaningful journey, there comes a moment when you stop asking one question. Why is this happening to me? And you begin asking a different one. What is this season preparing me for? That shift in perspective is powerful because it changes the way you see your life. Instead of viewing confusion as failure, instead of seeing delays as proof that something is wrong, you begin understanding that some of the most important transformations happen in the quiet seasons. The seasons when nothing seems clear. The seasons when your plans fall apart. The seasons when you feel like everyone else is moving forward while you are standing still. Those moments can feel deeply discouraging. They can make you question your direction. They can make you doubt your purpose. But many times, those very seasons are shaping the person you are becoming. They are developing qualities that success alone cannot teach. Patience, humility, resilience, faith. These are not traits that grow easily when life is comfortable. They are formed during moments when you are forced to keep moving forward without complete certainty. And those qualities matter more than many people realize. Because purpose is not just about what you achieve. It is about who you become while pursuing it. Think about the people who truly change the world around them. They are rarely the ones who had easy journeys. More often, they are people who faced obstacles that forced them to grow. People who experienced doubt, failure, and uncertainty, but refused to let those experiences define their limits. Instead, they allowed those seasons to strengthen them, to deepen their understanding of life, to shape the compassion and wisdom they would later share with others. And that is something important to remember. Your purpose is rarely only about you. It is often connected to the people you will help along the way, the encouragement you will offer someone who feels lost, the wisdom you will share with someone who is struggling, the example you will become for someone who needs hope. Your story may one day be the reason someone else finds the courage to continue their own journey. But that kind of impact cannot be created instantly. It grows through experience, through lessons learned during moments when the path felt uncertain, through seasons where your faith was tested and your strength was stretched. Those seasons are not meaningless. They are building the foundation for the influence your life will carry. So if you are currently walking through a time where things feel unclear, where the future feels uncertain, where you wonder why your purpose has not yet appeared, remember something important. Just because you cannot see the full path does not mean it does not exist. Many of the most meaningful journeys begin in darkness. Not because the destination is missing, but because the traveler is still becoming the person capable of reaching it. Growth often happens before clarity appears. Strength often develops before opportunity arrives. Character often forms before purpose is revealed. And once those qualities are ready, the path begins opening in ways that once seemed impossible. You start recognizing opportunities that align with your experiences. You start connecting with people who share your vision. You start stepping into moments where your story becomes meaningful not only to you, but to others. And suddenly, the years that once felt confusing begin revealing their purpose. They were shaping you, preparing you, teaching you lessons that would later become guidance for someone else. The truth is, no meaningful life journey is perfectly straight. There will always be moments where the road turns unexpectedly, moments where the destination disappears from view, moments where you must keep walking without knowing exactly where the path will lead. But those moments are not the end of your story. They are often the beginning of transformation, the beginning of discovering strengths you never knew you possessed, The beginning of learning how to trust the process even when you cannot control the outcome. And sometimes, those moments become the turning points that lead you toward the very purpose you have been searching for all along. So wherever you are in your journey right now, whether you feel confident about your direction, or whether you still feel lost and uncertain, know that your story is still unfolding. The chapters you are living today may one day become the very lessons that shape your purpose tomorrow. The struggles you are facing today may one day become the wisdom you share with someone else. The path may not be clear yet, but that does not mean it is not forming. And one day, when you look back at the journey you are walking now, you may realize something that once seemed impossible. The season where you thought you were lost was actually the moment your purpose was quietly being prepared. So keep moving forward. Keep learning. Keep trusting that even when life feels uncertain, growth is still happening. Because sometimes the greatest purposes are born during the very seasons when everything feels unclear. And when the time is right, the path that once felt invisible will finally begin to appear.